animation.
Doing some very important things for our country.
As the calls for the president's son-in-law to resign grow louder.
My name is Jared Kushner.
Tonight, NBC News reports that Robert Mueller is planning to charge Russians for hacking the DNC. Word of yet another White House departure and how Jared Kushner's troubles just keep growing. Then,
Congressman Nunes, I really think someday he's going to be greatly honored for his service and for what he's done.
New reporting of Devin Nunes conspiring to stop the Senate investigation of Trump and the Russians. And as the stock market plunges and some Democrats celebrate, what to make of the trade war the president just started.
Listen, you going to tax you 25%.
When All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Special Counsel Robert Mueller is getting ready to charge the Russian operatives who stole Democratic emails and released them to the public to influence the 2016 election. Current and former officials familiar with the matter are telling NBC News that, like the indictment a couple of weeks ago against the Russians who waged, quote, information warfare against the U.S. during the election, the possible new charges are expected to rely heavily on secret intelligence gathered by the CIA, the FBI, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security. According to NBC sources, the charges could come in the next few weeks or months. And the more Mueller's probe advances, the more chaotic it seems to get in the White House. The past few days seem to have been especially turbulent, even by the standards that have already been set by this administration. And that is not just the view from the outside, I hasten to add. Sources close to the president tell Axios that, and I'm quoting here, he's in a bad place. Mad as hell about the internal chaos and the sense that things are unraveling. Although they sort of always feel like they're unraveling, so who knows? Communications Director Hope Hicks is leaving, one of the president's longest-serving aides and closest confidants. The president's at war publicly and openly with his attorney general, who he calls Mr. Magoo, apparently behind his back. Said attorney general has refused to use the Department of Justice, at least as of yet, or as far as we know, to pursue criminal investigations of the president's political foes. And now 5 sources are telling MSNBC that the president's national security advisor may get the boot as early as next month. H.R. McMaster replaced previous national security advisor Michael Flynn last year after just 24 days on the job. Michael Flynn, of course, having pleaded guilty to a felony. According to BuzzFeed, many other staffers are now headed for the exits as the White House spins out of control. Today, this was how Chief of Staff John Kelly described leaving his old job as Homeland Security Secretary to work at the White House.
The last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security.
For their jobs. Plus, CNN learning that the U.S. is closer than ever to war with North Korea. Has Kim Jong-un crossed Trump's red line? Let's go out front. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, a White House in crisis. We have 2 major stories unfolding at this hour. First, President Trump's daughter and most influential advisor, Ivanka Trump, is under FBI scrutiny tonight. Sources telling CNN that counterintelligence officials are looking into negotiations and financing involving the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Vancouver. The scrutiny from the FBI could stand in the way of the first daughter getting full security clearance. The 69-story skyscraper in question features a trademark spa, the Ivanka Spa, opening just days after President Trump took office. And Ivanka was the key in the development of that building, meeting with the developer in the same boardroom that was featured in The Apprentice. And in 2014, here she is talking about her vision for the $360 million venture.
We wanted a hotel to be very modern, very cool, but in a timeless way that's appropriate for our brand.
Tonight's news coming just after Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner, saw his security clearance stripped, downgraded, essentially barring him from seeing intelligence with the highest levels of secrecy required for much of his job. Also breaking tonight, the president's relationship with his attorney general. Unbelievable what's happening here now. The White House today refusing to go on the record to confirm that the president actually has confidence in Jeff Sessions. Does the president want to get rid of his attorney general?
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of. Sarah Sanders is not afraid to come out and say no. She wouldn't do it. Not an endorsement, to say the very least. We are told the president is furious that Sessions fought back against him yesterday after he attacked Sessions and his Justice Department. We have so much to get to tonight. Kara Scannell is out front live in Washington. Pam Brown is at the White House. And I want to start there with you, Kara, on the Ivanka Trump news that you are breaking. This deal, the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Vancouver, now the subject of an FBI scrutiny investigation. What can you tell us?
Well, Aaron, we know that the FBI Counterintelligence Division has been looking at this deal, the contacts and financing around it. Now, we know Ivanka Trump was the point person on the deal. She worked very closely with the developer, who's the son of one of the wealthiest families in Malaysia. And when you're going through a security clearance and background checks to work in the White House, any foreign contacts are going to be interest, and especially when you have a business that is as complicated as the Trump organization. So that's one of the issues, and that may be a hurdle for Ivanka Trump in gaining her full security clearance. Now, her lawyer is pushing back strongly against our story, and let me read you the statement that he has given us. He says, CNN is wrong that any hurdle, obstacle, concern, red flag, or problem has been raised with respect to Ms. Trump or her clearance application. Nothing in the new White House policy has changed Mrs. Trump's ability to do the same work she has been doing since she joined the administration. So, Aaron, you can see they're pushing back pretty hard on this, but we do know the FBI counterintelligence is looking into this.
So obviously that's the reporting, and it's under scrutiny. Now, Kara, Ivanka obviously has been involved in a lot of business deals, and all of them could be very relevant to her security clearance. Why is this one specifically drawing interest from FBI investigators, and could other deals as well?
Well, we don't know exactly what is triggering the interest in this particular deal, but we do know that the FBI is concerned about contacts that the Chinese have had with Jared Kushner, her husband. We reported last week that they were looking into conversations he had with prominent Chinese investors concerning one of his properties. The Washington Post also reported that counterintelligence had warned Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump about contacts that they had with other Chinese officials. So that might be why this one deal is on their radar. And it is certainly possible that other deals could be under scrutiny as well. The Trump organization is very complicated. They do deals, these licensing and marketing arrangements with a lot of international investors, and a lot of their properties have luxury condos, which involves a lot of foreign money coming in through that also.
Right. All right, thank you very much, Kara. I brought to mind to remind everyone, take a look at that New Yorker article on Azerbaijan and Ivanka Trump if you want to get a sense for Trump international deals and her role in them. Pamela Brown is out front at the White House. And Pamela, today, the other big story, the president ignoring questions about his attorney general, but the reporting from you, he is clearly not happy with Jeff Sessions tonight.
Yeah, that's right. The public spat between the two men, Aaron, seems to have reached this boiling point with the president's tweet yesterday calling the attorney general disgraceful for having his inspector general rather than DOJ lawyers investigate alleged FISA abuses. And for the first time, the attorney general shot back with this strongly worded statement saying as long as he's the attorney general, that he will do his job with integrity under the law and the Constitution. Now, we are told from sources that the president privately fumed in the Oval Office about the attorney general's statement yesterday. He has talked about wanting to replace him, but the president realizes that the reality is much tougher to get another attorney general confirmed. And so this public spat has been going on for months, ever since the attorney general, Jeff Sessions, recused himself from the Russia probe. The president has been unhappy about that and has really held this grudge against him. But today, Aaron, the two men were in the same room at an opioid event, and the president acknowledged Jeff Sessions, saying that they were working together to bring lawsuits against drug makers, those that make opioids. And just last night, in the wake of all of this, the attorney general went out in Washington to dinner with two other top DOJ officials in what was widely seen as a showing of solidarity, a showing of unity. And today, though, you saw there at the press briefing, Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, far from certain in terms of Jeff Sessions' future. She would only say, "Not that I know of," when asked whether the president plans to get rid of Jeff Sessions. So we'll just have to wait and see how this saga plays out, Aaron.
All right, Pamela Brown, thank you very much. And I want to go out front now to the Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who's on the Foreign Relations, Judiciary, and Appropriations Committees. Will view, obviously, in all of these stories, and a vice chair of the Senate Ethics Committee. Thank you very much, Senator. I always appreciate your time. I want to talk about Jeff Sessions and the news there in a moment. First, though, the breaking news on Ivanka Trump under FBI scrutiny. Her security clearance still under review, in part because counterintelligence officials at the FBI are looking at least one of her international business deals, the Trump Hotel in Vancouver. Do you have any sense as to why this particular deal or Ivanka Trump are under scrutiny?
Aaron, I don't know why this particular deal might have attracted FBI scrutiny, but I will just say it is remarkable that we have a family like the Trumps who have such complex global business dealings that have subjected them to repeated scrutiny, and where President Trump has failed to be transparent with the American people, to release his taxes, to make it possible for us to understand the business dealings that he and his immediate family members have been involved in. And I'm not surprised that this is among many of the complex foreign transactions that are being looked at in the course of a number of investigations.
Right, and of course, obviously, you've got wealthy foreign buyers buying into those hotels, whether doing so, implicitly or explicitly to curry favor. These are very real questions and very important ones. Jared Kushner, of course, has been stripped of his top secret security clearance. Senator, as you know, the Washington Post is reporting officials from at least 4 countries, Mexico, Israel, China, and the UAE, have talked about ways to use Kushner's financial difficulties, lack of experience, to manipulate him. Should Jared Kushner, should Ivanka Trump be granted these top-level security clearances at this point when it's been a year and they haven't been able to clear them?
Well, I think General Kelly did the right thing in downgrading Jared Kushner's security clearance, given the wide range of unresolved issues and the repeated problems Jared has had with being fully transparent in the background check process that he's been going through in order to get his clearance. He either forgot to disclose or misrepresented a number of meetings that he had with foreign officials. And recent reporting that suggests that Jared Kushner got $500 million in loans for a critical business deal that he was trying to advance after folks attended a White House meeting with him raises even more concerns about potential conflicts of interest. It's important that we have in the presidency and in the White House, in senior officials who are intimately involved in crafting the president's foreign policy, folks who are not just avoiding conflicts of interest, but who aren't creating constant appearances of conflict of interest.
Right.
The reporting you just referenced, Aaron, suggests that some of our foreign allies and adversaries have taken note of this potential weakness.
So should Jared Kushner even be in this job? Because by the standard you're raising, he is raising questions about
He raises real concerns, I think.
Yeah.
I think General Kelly has made it clear that he's got concerns about whether Jared should be in the middle of some of the most important national secrets. And I don't see how it's possible for Jared to continue to carry forward the mission the president's given him to craft and to unveil a new Middle East peace plan if he doesn't have access to top secret information.
Sarah Sanders, you heard refuse to confirm that the President of the United States has confidence in his Attorney General. Not that I know of, no plans that she's aware of to get rid of him, but that's as far as she would go. You and I both know she's willing to go much farther. She obviously has a reason for not being willing to commit to that. Do you think the President's trying to get rid of Jeff Sessions? Is this it?
Well, the striking thing about the President and the Department of Justice is that President Trump seems to have never understood that this is not his personal legal team. The Department of Justice swears allegiance to the Constitution and represents the people of the United States in court and advocates for the nation's interests, not narrowly for the president's interests. And he has repeatedly picked fights with the Attorney General, with the Deputy Attorney General, with the special counsel. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is correct that the right thing to do was to refer the matter that the president raised about surveillance to the Inspector General, to the IG. And the president's wrong to be criticizing the Attorney General publicly and privately this way. And I am concerned that it could lead not only to the firing of Attorney General Sessions, but then to the undermining and eventual firing of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We in the Senate should be taking stronger steps to protect the special counsel.
Which, of course, hasn't happened. But before we go quickly, I mean, if you were Jeff Sessions, would you take the abuse that your boss deals out regularly, calling, weak, Mr. Magoo, beleaguered, very weak? Is Sessions right to stay and take it, or should he quit?
It's unprecedented to have a president so publicly abusing his Attorney General. I can only guess that what Attorney General Sessions is doing is staying to stand up for the independence of the Department of Justice, and I respect his doing so if that's really what's motivating him.
All right, Senator Coons, thank you. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Aaron.
And next, breaking news, the White House on the verge of another major departure. Hard to believe we're even saying this here. Sources telling us National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster could be gone by the end of the month. Plus, more turmoil as the heat over Jared Kushner's wheeling and dealing is getting hotter and hotter. Can he still hold a job at all in the White House? And the stock market plunging today on the president's plan for massive tariffs. Breaking news, what could be another major exit at the White House tonight. We are learning that the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, is likely to leave the White House by the end of the month. This is according to an administration official telling CNN. Tensions between the president and the three-star general have been escalating. Most recently, the president ripped into McMaster over remarks he made regarding Russian interference in the election. McMaster saying it happened. The president obviously throwing mud in that. Sources say the president will ultimately make the final decision. If McMaster leaves, it will leave the administration looking for a third national security advisor since the president took office. Jim Sciutto is out front. Jim, look, this is pretty stunning. It's not just the track record of this administration, but you're talking 3 national security advisors in just over a year. What are you learning about McMaster's likely exit?
Aaron, my colleague Barbara Starr and I, we're told that General McMaster could leave his position in the White House by the end of the month or in the near future, multiple sources telling CNN. In addition, it is becoming more likely that McMaster will not return to the military in a possible 4-star job there, but rather ultimately retire as a 3-star general. Among the names being considered to replace McMaster are Safra Catz. She's a CAO of Oracle, a former member of the Trump transition team. John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN. We've also been told that Stephen Biegun, a vice president at Ford Motor Company, as well as a former senior staff member to Condoleezza Rice in the George W. Bush administration, considered, although Ford is telling us that he has not spoken to the White House about this position. The NSC spokesman Michael Anton has dismissed these reports using a favorite phrase of the White House, fake news. We've reached out to the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense James Mattis's office. They're referring all questions regarding such personnel matters back to the White House. I should add that at least one senior military officer currently serving has been informally approached about whether he would be interested in the job. He has said no because of this officer's belief that he could not fill what is essentially a political job while serving in uniform. That's according to a source familiar with the situation. I should add this caution, and this is perhaps a smart one, in the current going-ons in the White House, that President Trump will ultimately make the final decision here, and these kinds of decisions could always change.
Right. Well, and of course, he wants to call something fake news, so maybe he delays a little bit so that he can say it. Well, I mean, this is the games that he plays. All right, Jim Sciutto, thank you very much. Out front now, CNN military analyst Major General James Spider Marks, former Assistant Secretary for Department of Homeland Security Juliette Kayyem, and former advisor to 4 presidents David Gergen. Thanks to all. General Marks, obviously this is a big development when you think about just the departures that we've just had. You look at Hope Hicks' announcement just last night that H.R. McMaster could be gone by the end of the month. What's the significance of this? A 3rd national security advisor we'd be talking about in about a year.
Well, let's be frank. Organizations like this have turmoil in terms of personnel as a matter of routine. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we have with this is the context. And that is, look what's happened over the course of the last several months. Look what have the events that have occurred just in the last couple of days. And now you have the discussion that H.R. McMaster may be departing. The concern that I have primarily is the continuity of what has really been, in my mind, one of the solid aspects and one of the solid policies that this administration has been able to advance, and that is globally trying to reassert American influence in a way that I think it's fair to say had withered over the course of the past few years. Now, did we have some bumps in the road? Absolutely we did. But have we been able to reach a point where we are now on the peninsula, Korean Peninsula, where many would say, look, we're on the verge of potentially having a war, but at the same time we have the North Koreans now that are raising their hands saying we'd like to have some talks. So I think there's some advances. How do we make that transition and make it smoothly? That's the question.
And yet, David, to this point about smoothly, you're talking about 3 national security advisors in a year, a president who has been feuding with his national security advisor. CNN reported he was on the brink of letting McMaster go last fall, and he decided not to do it only because he thought he would look bad doing it within the first technical year of his term. He's had disdain for McMaster. Just in February, when McMaster blamed the Russians for hacking the election, Trump took to Twitter to humiliate him, saying, quote, General McMaster forgot to say that the results of the 2016 election were not impacted or changed by the Russians, and that the only collusion was between Russia and Crooked H, the DNC, and the Dems. That was part of his tweet. I mean, David, with this context, what do you make of the fact that the president could be at this point right now?
General Marks is right that it is routine to have people coming and going, including from the national security post. But what is unprecedented is the unraveling we seem to be watching coming from this White House and from this administration. Within hours after Hope Hicks has announced her resignation, we have we've just reported on Jeff Sessions may be leaving. Now we have understanding that McMaster may be leaving. There are rumors swirling that Kelly could follow him out the door. Okay. There are rumors about Gary Cohen leaving. And if you look at all that, I don't know of any administration which has ever had that much turmoil and that much sort of falling of the pillars of the government in question. Now, to be sure, I think as Jim Sciutto said, this could change. The president some weeks ago we all thought Secretary of State Tillerson would be gone by now. He seems to be more solidly in place than he was before. Yeah. So it could change, but I think we are seeing something that's very fundamental to governance, and that is an unraveling. It includes the president's daughter Ivanka and now Jared. I think Jared has no place in the White House if he can't have top secret clearance, and he would be better off himself if he stepped back from it and go and work with his companies and get them back on a better footing. You know, there is a lot here that goes to the fundamental capacity of this White House to govern.
Juliette, on this point, the Trump administration has lost about 34% of its quote-unquote A-team, according to Brookings, in year one. That's 1 in 3, okay? Now, just so everyone can understand, when General Marks and David used the word unprecedented, this is why, perhaps. And for Obama in year one, it was 9%. For George W. Bush in year one, it was 6%. Reagan was the only one even close at 17. 34%. Juliette, the question is, can the president afford to lose McMaster? In light of the reporting Jim was just sharing, that perhaps some of an effort to reach out to a possible replacement has been rebuffed.
In my mind, there's no question McMaster is going to be gone, because we've seen this story before where there starts to be the rumors and then they deny it and then someone's gone. I think the reason isn't just simply that he's gone head-to-head with President Trump. It's what he's gone head-to-head about, and that's about Russia. This is the area that Donald Trump will not take, will not allow others to sort of, leave the talking points, which McMaster clearly did when he spoke about Russians' clear influence in the election. So in my mind, this is, we've done this dance before. McMaster's going to be gone. Someone else will come in. And then from the perspective of two different parties, this means a lot, not just the White House. The other agencies and civil servants who work in these agencies, who work with the national security staff, this is very hard to get around. This is chaos at the top level. And it's public chaos. That's the difference. It's public chaos. The other is the international community. And I don't just mean our enemies, North Korea. I think about the Canadians all the time, Mexico all the time, the Great Britain all the time. They are looking at this and they are thinking nothing's holding. We're unraveling. And that's a reflection of the United States, not a reflection simply of Donald Trump's governance standards.
And David Gargan, you mentioned that you don't think Jared Kushner can serve in the White House without his top secret security clearance in any capacity. What do you make of the reporting tonight from our Kara Scannell that Ivanka Trump is under FBI scrutiny? And her security clearance has not gone through, which has been almost a year since she joined the White House. What do you make of that?
Well, the larger lesson is that you cannot turn the White House into a family business, and we've never seen that before either. And a lot of people warned against it. Tons of people warned against it before it started and said there are going to be inevitable conflicts of interest. And here we are. And both individuals, I'm sure they're angry. I'm sure they feel put upon, that people are out to get them. But you cannot take a very complex business relationship with you into the White House and not begin to find conflicts of interest, especially when you're trying to help your companies or you're having private conversations with key people and suddenly there's money coming in the door. That creates suspicions.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all very much. I mean, it's sort of definitional. When the company has your name on it, it doesn't matter whether they're technically running it or not. People are going to give you money or bail you out or do all kinds of offers to try to curry favor with you. It's just the way it is. Thank you all. And next, the stock market plunging today. President Trump sparking the fall because he essentially threw the first salvo out in what could be a major trade war with massive tariffs, and his own party is angry. And optics, terrible for Jared Kushner. We've got new reporting tonight on exactly what he's doing with his family business and possible. New tonight, the Dow plunging more than 400 points after President Trump announced massive tariffs on steel and aluminum imports in a hastily arranged meeting at the White House.
How long do you think
Unlimited period. Unlimited.
Is it 25% sure?
It'll be 25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum. And it'll be for a long period of time.
Very clear. Now, the market plunging because of 25% surge on steel, just as an example, a tariff there, according to economic analysis and what's happened in the past, would mean steel prices would go up for things like cars in America. And, of course, other countries are likely to retaliate, which would hurt American exports. The bottom line is that tariffs usually mean two things: rising prices in America and American job losses, which is a terrible combination. And that is why the president is standing very lonely on this issue. His Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, his Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, his National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, and his Director of the National Economic Council, Gary Cohn, are all against Trump's tariffs. Speaker Paul Ryan came out against them. Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, said the tariffs are, quote, a huge job-killing tax hike on American consumers. Orrin Hatch, Republican, saying, quote, I don't believe in tariffs. They don't work well. Secondly, it creates tariff wars, and I just don't think that's the way to go. And I could go on and on and on, and I don't even need to go to Democrats here. Let's just stick with people who support this president. They hate it. Out front now, former advisor of the Trump campaign, Steve Cortez, who's been in West Wing meetings the past few days, including today, and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, Joan Walsh. Thanks to both. Joan, you're closest to me. I'll start with you.
Okay, Aaron.
Sources say members of the White House were caught off guard by this announcement today. They didn't expect it to happen. It was a hastily arranged meeting. The White House, of course, denies it, says that is not at all the case. Here's Sarah Sanders.
This is something, again, that the president has been talking about for a long time. It's not a surprise, and we're going to continue doing what we can to protect American workers.
Not a surprise? You buy it?
Come on, of course not. He's been talking about it for a long time. That's true.
Yeah.
But the meeting was not on the agenda. We would have known about the meeting being on the agenda. He took everyone by surprise. He took his own administration by surprise, as you showed. And I think he's taking the world by surprise, and maybe himself, because he's been crusading against Chinese steel. But our #1 importer is Canada. Canada, a great partner, a great ally, a great trading partner. They're outraged. The Chinese don't even rank in the top 5 steel imports to this country. So it's sort of it's this cockamamie, shoot first, aim later. It felt like it was meant to sort of distract from the other crazy headlines, but I don't know that he has the presence of mind to actually plan to do that. But it's nutty.
He's going against all of his experts on this issue and his allies in Congress.
Well, I wouldn't say all, but by the way, I think this is important.
Peter Navarro, obviously, is on his side. There's one.
Right.
Well, I'm on his side.
Okay.
I'd be an expert
on
on
this
his
one,
side. Listen, here's the thing. When the president spoke, by the way, consumer confidence just hit a 17-year high. And that's not unrelated to what President Trump is doing in terms of taxes, in terms of trade, in terms of regulation. Part of what he described when he ran for president, part of what he described in his inauguration, and he was roundly mocked for this, is American carnage. And he talked about the carnage of what globalism has done to the American worker, and he vowed to protect the American worker against unfair trade deals. China has been taking us to the cleaners for decades.
But this doesn't hurt
President
China,
Trump
Steve.
has said,
this barely hurts China.
Enough. Our trade deals are going to be fair. We demand reciprocity. We demand fairness. And, by the way, stop stealing our intellectual property. Okay, on these terms, here's the thing, though, Joan, even if this specific deal isn't China-centered, the point is President Trump is telling the world America will no longer be the willing victim in terrible trade deals because the American worker has suffered terribly.
We also need to notice that Donald Trump used a lot of Chinese steel in his own building. So the time to stand up to the Chinese might have been when he was still in the building business. Right now, he's sending a tough message to some of our greatest allies. And I think it's so interesting. You're such a loyal guy. You're great. But you come in here and you want to talk about all the other leading economic indicators. We're never here talking about them, Steve, because your president is constantly stepping on his own message.
So to this point, I want to talk about Gary Cohn, who is very much against these tariffs and has been a voice of political moderation, more traditional GOP policies in the White House. He lost, okay? And he lost big on this, Steve. There's no question about it. You were with him today. He's the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He is seen by some as perhaps the last and loudest voice tempering Trump's behavior on issues like this. Politico is reporting this could be the final straw. So now you have Hope Hicks going. You have the report H.R. McMaster could be gone soon. You have who knows what that's going on with Jeff Sessions. Gary Cohn could be leaving. How important is Gary Cohn?
Listen, I think he's important. But at the same time, I saw in your last segment, Aaron, there was a lot of talk about unraveling, right? That phrase was used, I think, 5 or 6 times at least in the last. You know what's not unraveling? The American economy, consumer confidence. You know who is unraveling? ISIS. Okay, that's what I want to talk about. In terms of the administration, is it in chaos? No, I don't think so at all. I'll tell you this. I was in the West Wing yesterday, West Wing today. There's incredible confidence, like the American people have confidence, in what we're doing for this country, in cutting taxes, in cutting regulation, in growth, in optimism.
Let me just play for you then, because Anthony Scaramucci spent some time there too, and he now came on TV this morning.
A bit of time.
Yeah, a bit of time, but he's back and forth all the time. He talks to the president. Sure. Okay. He's saying the opposite of what you're saying. Here's what he said this morning.
The morale's terrible. And the reason why the morale's terrible is that the rule by fear and intimidation does not work in a civilian environment.
Okay, it's a slam of John Kelly, but that's his comment about you're saying there's confidence. He's saying the morale is terrible.
Everyone is reporting.
So one of you guys is telling. One of you guys is either totally out of the loop or wrong.
One of us is nuts. Obviously,
Hicks has hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills. Anthony's
a friend of mine. He's dead wrong on this. Okay, General Kelly is an amazing leader. He's had an amazing career. He's doing an incredible job in the White House right now. Here's the thing. In New York newsrooms, in the Acela corridor between New York and Washington, there's much consternation. Out there in America, all right, get away from Washington, get to Wichita, get to Washington State. Out there in America, confidence is growing. Things are going great. People are getting more money in their pay-home checks. People are taking risks on new businesses, business formation. Small business optimism is at an all-time high.
So who do you believe, Steve or Ant of a Mooch?
No, It's hard to believe either. No, Steve is sitting here. I guess I believe the mooch. Obviously, he has a conflict of interest. He hates Kelly. He knows he's gone because of Kelly. So that does impeach him to some extent, right? Look at where he's coming from. On the other hand, everybody is reporting about chaos and morale. We can see chaos. We can see what's going on with Jeff Sessions. We haven't even mentioned the names Jared and Ivanka in this segment, with Ivanka's new investigation into her Vancouver deal, and Jared having raised $500 million from countries and companies that came to visit him when he had this job. These people don't belong in the White House either.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And you mentioned that. We are going to be talking about that just in a moment because it's an important story tonight. Did Jared Kushner's company land mega loans after key meetings at the White House? Look at Trump's business deals. Sources telling CNN that U.S. counterintelligence officials at the FBI are scrutinizing the negotiations and financing surrounding the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Vancouver. The FBI probe could be a hurdle to Ivanka getting full security clearance, which she is, working in the White House without. This is the White House is defending her husband, Jared Kushner, after it was revealed that his family businesses scored $500 million. Hold on. $500 million in loans. After Jared Kushner sat down with company heads for White House meetings. It's almost like you have to stop and think for a second about the huge significance of that statement. Christina Alessi is out front with the report.
This Chicago skyscraper is majority owned by Jared Kushner and his family. Mortgage documents show a fund linked to New York City private equity powerhouse Apollo Global Management provided them with a $184 million mortgage for the building. Apollo was founded by Josh Harris. Months earlier, that same executive was in talks with the White House about an advisory role, according to a source with knowledge of the discussions. Jared stepped down as CEO of his family's business, Kushner Companies, since going to Washington. But questions of conflicts still persist. Also at the White House, Jared met with Citibank CEO Michael Corbett last year. Around the same time, Citibank made a $325 million loan to Kushner Companies and its partners. Spokespeople for both Apollo and Citibank said their executives were not involved in granting those loans.
You also have to worry about whether he has an incentive to use his official power, to use the power of the White House to help people that he has business relations with.
A Kushner Company spokesperson said there was nothing inappropriate, and stories like these attempt to make insinuating connections that do not exist, to disparage the financial institutions and the companies involved. Just last week, CNN reported that special counsel Robert Mueller is inquiring about Kushner approaching foreign investors during the transition, including a Chinese insurance company and a Qatari investor for the family's biggest bet, 666 Fifth Avenue. The building hasn't generated enough profit to cover its debts.
$1.8 billion was a record price for a Manhattan skyscraper. It was a highly, highly leveraged deal, which means the income in the building wasn't even close to covering what they would have to pay in interest. So it was a deal that a lot of people say was doomed from the start.
About $1.2 billion in debt on the tower comes due next year. But sources say that negotiations with lenders and new sources of capital need to start soon. Kushner Companies confirmed it's in talks to buy out its partner in the project. But the question remains, how will they pay for it? When asked by CNN, they declined to comment.
They're always looking for loans and construction loans and development loans and acquisition loans. So I would say it's an active business.
Kushner Companies also needs to find investors for a development in Jersey City. The company scuttled a plan to use a government program that would help foreigners get U.S. visas in exchange for investment after Jared's sister was reportedly referencing him during a presentation in China. Another deal raising questions, the New York Times reported that Kushner Companies received $30 million from one of Israel's largest financial institutions, just before Jared's first diplomatic trip to the country. Last week, the Washington Post reported officials from at least 4 countries, Mexico, Israel, China, and the United Arab Emirates, discussed ways they can manipulate Jared because of his family's finances. The constant search for capital, which is normal for any real estate firm, casts a cloud over Jared's White House role, because like his father-in-law, he has refused to fully divest from his holdings.
Aaron, bottom line is that Jared Kushner and his family have complex financial holdings all throughout the United States. And I remember sources telling me early in the transition that Jared Kushner and his advisors were essentially trying to reassure U.S. government ethics watchdogs and agencies that these deals would not be a problem because they're static deals, long-term and boring. And these examples show they are anything but, and that leaves Jared open to potential conflicts and vulnerabilities so long as he's in the White House and possibly beyond that.
All right, thank you very much, Christina. That report, I mean, it's just pretty incredible when you think about it. Washington Post columnist, CNN political commentator Catherine Rampell is with me now. I mean, when Christina's laying that out, $500 million in loans after meeting with people at the White House. I mean, it's just hard to wrap your mind around that could actually even happen. How bad is this?
Oh, it's terrible. And what's especially terrible is that we don't know the terms of those loans. And you were in financial journalism for a long time. You know, it's very easy to hide things in a complicated arrangement like this. You know, what is the right interest rate that should have been charged on these loans? If the right interest rate, you know, let's say the prevailing rate is 4%, they charge 2%, and it's a $100 million loan, that's a $2 million bribe. Right? I mean, we don't know what these terms are, and what's the right rate given that, you know, this company might be about to default as well. So there's a lot of ways that you could have hidden a bribe in these kinds of arrangements, which is exactly why, A, we should know the terms, but B, more importantly, he should have divested to begin with.
Well, as Christina points out, as you're mentioning, he didn't divest. So if you don't divest and you know the company is raising money, how can you, as a person of integrity and a strong business person, as Jared Kushner apparently is, how could you take the meeting?
Look, on the one hand, we're told that Jared is some wonderkind who is wise beyond his years and deserves to have all these incredibly challenging things in his portfolio, like peace in the Middle East and trade with China and the opioid crisis and whatever else. And on the other hand, we're supposed to believe that he's a hapless rube who doesn't know anything about politics or the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Right.
You know,
Innocent.
He's innocent. You know, you can't have it both ways. Either he's sophisticated and he should have known better, or he's completely hapless and he shouldn't have. So neither one looks good for him.
No, neither one looks good. And again, just to emphasize, this comes as his security clearance is in question. He's been stripped of the top level. All right, thank you very much, Catherine.
Rio could be a